Hello everybody, I'm back. This is my first experiment for you guys with doing video. Hopefully this works out. I don't want this one to be too long, and I will hopefully be serving just a whole series of videos for the class to serve instead of me lecturing. And then we'll have conversations on the discussion board, and we'll see how this works. All right, so let me move to my main screen, and I should be at the beginning of this. Okay, so we're going to talk about the two definitions of philosophy, and this is something that we have already covered, so it's review, but it'll be helpful for you for the midterm to review this. So I figured I'd make a short video, and I wanted to connect it to art. I have two pieces of art that are trying to visually show you these two different definitions of philosophy, so we'll see how this works. All right, so you probably remember this. There's our textbook. What are we reading? We're reading William James's book, Some Problems of Philosophy, published in 1911. This is after he has already passed away. It's his last book. And what did he want to do in his last book? He wanted to write an introduction to philosophy. His first books are an introduction to psychology, and his final book will be an introduction to philosophy. And we know that this book is meant to challenge the traditional philosophy textbook at the time, which was the German textbook. So he's challenging European philosophy, and he's presenting the American textbook, and he says this is going to be different than the European traditional philosophy textbook. And one of the things he says he's going to do different is he's not going to start with a definition, which is what the German textbook thinks you have to start with. How could you start a subject without defining it first? Doesn't make any sense. Well, William James says, I'm not going to do it that way. Of course, by page 4, so not even that far in, he says, okay, let me actually talk a little bit about definitions. See it over here. He says, I will tarry a moment, however, over the matter of definition. So here we are having to tarry with him and figure out what he's trying to do. What is he trying to communicate? And he starts to talk about what the traditional definition of philosophy is. All right, this is coming from the traditional German textbook that everybody's using. And what is the traditional definition? Well, he says it comes from the scholastic textbooks. And he gives us this quote right here. The knowledge of things in general by their ultimate causes, so far as natural reason can attain to such knowledge. And we talked about this. This is a definition that says philosophy is knowledge. And it's knowledge about things, not specific things, but things in general. So it's not about a specific person. It's about people in general. And knowing them by their ultimate causes, or whatever it is, whatever that thing is, in general now, generalized. Not any specific thing, but that kind of thing. Well, to know what, have knowledge of that kind of thing is to know what makes it what it is, right? Ultimate causes. And we said other ways of saying that are essences, right? An essence of something, a principle a rule that governs that kind of thing. These are all knowledge of things in general by their ultimate causes, right? As far as we can use reason. Okay, so reason in the mind, thinking. What does William James do? Well, he actually takes that definition and takes us on a little journey. He starts to change it in a very natural way, it feels. And it reminds us of something that's very important to William James, which is evolution, right? How things change through small changes over time. So we have here the evolution of the definition of philosophy. And we know that our Okay, so we know that our first traditional definition of philosophy is that philosophy is a body of knowledge, right? A specific kind of knowledge, but a body of knowledge. Okay, so how's he going to change this? Well, he focuses on that kind of knowledge that philosophy is about, which is things in general, right? So if we focus on the kind of knowledge of things in general, right? He says we're not talking about any specific thing, right? We're talking in the abstract, we could say. That means that we're actually talking about everything that fits in that category, right? So if we're talking about not a specific chair, but just chairs, right? Chairs in the abstract, then we're kind of talking about all chairs at once, because whatever is true of chairs in the abstract has to be true of all specific chairs. So if we're talking about all things, then he says it's kind of like being able to take a view of everything at once. And everything at once is sort of the world itself. So we've evolved here from of things in general, things in the abstract, to all specific things that fit in that, we'll say, category, and then to all things of the world. And finally, he's going to say, well, really what we're talking about then is a perspective on the world. So this is what becomes our new definition. Let me actually go to the next page, because it's really sort of over here that he says it's a Weltanschauung, right? Which we said what meant a perspective on the Welt, in the world. So philosophy, the new definition is that philosophy is a body of perspectives, right? Not just because there's many different ways of seeing the world. So there's not just one. Before we have the old definition, right, of knowledge of what makes something what it is. And that seems to be just one thing. But now we have a whole body of different things, whole body of different perspectives. And that's what philosophy is. So what have we done here? Well, we've sort of moved from rationalism, right, a definition, starting with a principle, to empiricism, starting with a bunch of different ways of seeing the world. Okay, and we've been talking a lot about this conflict between rationalism and empiricism. And here we have it playing out in the definition of philosophy. And we know that German philosophy, William James will argue, is overly rationalistic, right? European philosophy has become very rationalistic because science has separated itself from philosophy, and science has sort of become the new empiricism, and philosophy, to distinguish itself, is become rationalism. Okay, so let's connect this up to art. Let's look at some drawings and paintings. The first one I want to look at is Leonardo da Vinci, and this is the Vitruvian Man, which apparently was drawn around 1492, which I guess is when Columbus sailed the blue. Is that how it goes? Okay, so this is the old definition, the traditional definition of philosophy, of a person, right? This isn't any particular person. This is the ideal person with the ideal proportions inside a square and a circle, and that Da Vinci is trying to capture the essence of a human body. All right, so this is the old one because it's not any specific person, and it's meant to be ideal. It's meant to be sort of a principle of the perfect human. And perfection is really important here, because it's like knowledge, it's truth, it's one truth, it's in our mind. And so the ideal sets up the definition. It exists in our mind, and it has this truth to it. All right, what's my next piece of art? It comes from Russia, and this is our new evolved definition. It's Liubov Popova, and she actually was alive right when William James is alive too, and writing, and she's very much in touch, I feel, with some of these new currents that are running through in philosophy. And so this painting is called A Portrait of a Philosopher. It's painted in 1915, so 4 years after this book comes out. And it turns out that her youngest brother, Pavel, was actually a philosopher. So she draws her brother, and she draws it in this very contemporary style at the time, Cubism. And what is Cubism but a painting that's composed of all these different snapshots, right? All sort of put together, all different perspectives. And they're all slightly different angles, perspectives, and then it's all sort of put together. And so what do we have in this painting? We have a body of perspectives of a philosopher. And so this is the new picture of a person that tries to capture, not just from one perspective, not that ideal perspective of Da Vinci, which is like straight on, and then straight on, and then maybe slightly turned, but a very sort of one perspective. Here we have a whole collection of perspectives that all captured at once, and trying to see all those perspectives at once. I think this is a great painting to kind of capture what William James is trying to present as this new definition of philosophy. Okay, I'm sure all of you are really excited. You didn't know that there was this painting, The Portrait of a Philosopher, out there. And so probably a lot of you are like, where can I get this painting? And of course, it's a famous painting. It's in a gallery somewhere. But it turns out I was doing some research, and if you go to Walmart, you will actually find this painting for sale for $199.99. And then I realized it was out of stock, which is unfortunate. But I did a little bit more research, and it turns out on Etsy, you don't get the frame, but you can still get a reproduction. These are canvas print reproductions, and you could have it stretched, and it will only cost you $108.90, because right now you can save $46.69, 30%. So I guess this is a great bargain. I don't know, but it's a pretty interesting picture of a philosopher. Okay, let's get back here and continue just for a moment. So we have these two definitions of philosophy. We have philosophy as a body of knowledge, which is ideal, and it's monistic. Okay, it's what makes something what it is. It's sort of one truth. On the other hand, we have philosophy as a body of perspectives. And there's many perspectives, and each perspective is relative to a different standpoint or attitude. And so we move into this pluralistic domain. And in that pluralistic domain, we have the emergence of William James's answer to the conflict between empiricism and rationalism, which he feels is at a stalemate, that we can't get past these two main camps. And so he's presenting a way past through pragmatism. And what's the whole idea there? Use what works, right? So that he can go back to this new definition, a body of perspectives, and say, well, use the perspective that works for you right now. And if it stops working, then use a different perspective. And this is a way for him to get past the stalemate in philosophy at that time. Okay, so there we have it. And I'll be making more of these videos. The next one's going to actually, we're just going to look at some midterm questions, and I'll talk about them and give you some ideas. Okay, thank you.